Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Thanks so much for being part of small group this week. I hope that you're doing great. I hope that you've enjoyed a great week. Maybe you're experiencing God's love and peace this week. I know for myself, we've had an amazing few weeks, not only as a family, but also as a WDS community. In fact, this past Sunday night, a bunch of us hung out at the church for a bit. We played some ridiculous games, we ate some great food. Then we jumped on a bus and we headed up to Highland Orchard for a hayride and a bonfire. It was just an awesome time of being together, of laughing around the fire and just making some memories. Somehow a bonfire always turns into a marshmallow battle, which I don't know how that happens, but I know that it's always amazing. So thanks for being part of that. Yeah, and before I forget, um, for as much fun as that was, we have an amazing Friendsgiving party that's coming up on November 14th. It's at 7 o'clock at the church upstairs. There's a ton of adults who are making a Thanksgiving meal for us. There's going to be all sorts of food, and I want you to be part of it. We're going to set up a bunch of tables, have us all gather around it together as friends and just enjoy time together. How good does that sound? We've spent so much time apart on our computers, doing all sorts of things away from each other. But now we're coming back together, and I want you there. So we'll have great food, some amazing games, a short teaching. It's just going to be a great way to welcome in Thanksgiving, the holiday season, and I hope that you can be part of it. Well, in our small group gatherings like this one, we've been in a study for the last several weeks called God Has a Name. In fact, for the last 6 weeks, we've been reflecting on Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 to 7. A lot of us are familiar with this passage, but I think most of us are even more familiar with John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he sent his only son, right? You might remember this, and it goes on from there. It talks about how God sent Jesus to save us. Maybe you've seen signs about John 3:16, or maybe you've heard someone mention it, or maybe you even know what it says. You could recite the whole thing. John 3:16 though can pretty much summarize the purpose of Jesus in a single verse. And that's why it's so important that Christ followers know it and memorize it so that they can remember the purpose of Jesus. Well, we've been looking at Exodus 34, 6 to 7. And this verse, that we've been looking at for the last 6 weeks, is kind of like the Old Testament equivalent of John 3:16. In fact, to the people of Israel, it held that much importance, just like John 3:16 does to the church. Well, this week we've come to the end of verse 7, and we've learned a bunch of really important things about who God is, about who he is, and what he wants us to know about him. We've learned that God is compassionate towards us, that he actually feels for us, that he sees us in the situations that we're in. We've learned that God is gracious, that not only does he feel for us, but he actually takes action to demonstrate his love for us. We've learned that he's slow to anger, that he's patient, he's not volatile, that he's not, just like going off the rails and throwing his anger at us. He's slow to anger. We've learned that he's abounding in love and faithfulness, that he has this loyalty that he shows us. It's a covenant, it's not a contract, it's a promise that he keeps. We've learned that he forgives rebellion, wickedness, sin, that despite all the different ways that we wrong God, that we disobey him or live in a way that he doesn't want us to live, he shows us forgiveness. We've also learned that he's just, that he doesn't pardon those who have done wrongdoing, but in fact, he punishes sin. But he actually still shows us forgiveness by sending Jesus to die for our sins. And what this tells us is that God's end goal is to create an entire world that is set free from sin. His mercy far outweighs his need for justice, for it far outweighs his punishment. Yes, he's just, but he's way more merciful. This list of who Yahweh is, this personal God, it's extensive. And isn't it amazing to know that this is who God is and that he wants us to know him this way? But the list doesn't actually end there. In fact, there's one more trait that remains. It's actually found in the context of verses 8 through 15. So let's take a look at Exodus 34, 8, and then through all the way through the first part of verse 15. It says this: And Moses quickly bowed his head toward the earth and he worshiped. And he said, "If I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, please let the Lord go in the midst of us, be among us. For we are a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance." And Yahweh said, "Behold, I am making a covenant. Before all your people, I will do marvels such as have not been created in all the earth or in any nation. And all the people among whom you are shall see the work of Yahweh, for it is an awesome thing that I will do with you. Observe what I have commanded you this day. Behold, I will drive out before you all the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Take care lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land to which you go, lest it become a snare in your midst. You shall tear down their altars and break their pillars and cut down their Asherim, for you shall not worship any other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. And the passage goes on from there. So, what's being said in this passage? Moses is committing himself and the people of Israel to God's leadership. He's saying that they are ready to follow Yahweh. And then Yahweh is responding, and he's saying that he will not accept them being shared with any other gods. In fact, Yahweh describes himself as jealous. Now, we tend to think of jealous in terms of anger and evil, and in terms of some sort of like insecure or like jealous relationship, or maybe boyfriend or girlfriend. But in this context, what Yahweh is saying is that he's not insecure, but in fact that he's passionate for us. Like I'm passionate for my wife and I love her and I want to serve her. God longs to love us and serve us exclusively. He's not afraid that we're going to turn our backs on him, but in fact, he just wants us to know his love. And we've seen his love displayed previously in this chapter in the way that God describes himself. He wants us exclusively, and he wants us to want him exclusively. That's why he goes on and he says that he will drive out the other gods of the land. You see, God will fight for us and for our love. This is our God, the one who fights for us. And remember, when we hear Yahweh, we don't just hear a label. That's not just his name, like my name is Dave, but we're actually talking about his reputation. God is saying that he is all of these things. He's the one who loves us, who displays his love, who forgives us, who fights for us, and so much more. And so, what does that mean for us? If this is how God feels about us, then who are we and what do we become? In Deuteronomy 28, God is speaking blessings over the people of Israel. He's saying who they will be. And in chapter 28, verse 10, we read something incredibly important. It says, "And all the peoples of the earth shall see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of you." In the context of this verse, calling is the important passage, it's the important word. But we should note the origin of fear. You see, the fear that Yahweh is talking about here isn't so much a physical experience, but rather an emotional and spiritual recognition of who these people are loved by Yahweh. The other nations will see that God loves his people, and it will fill the nations with awe. So, what does it mean then to be called? It means to be locked into a relationship with another. In the same sense that my wife took on my last name as a sign of our commitment to each other. So we are called to take on the name of God's people, called by God to carry his name in this life. We are called to live for him. We are called to live for the one who is compassionate, is gracious, is slow to anger, and so on and so forth. And so, how do we do that? Well, in another passage in the Old Testament, in Leviticus 19, we find a moment where God is instructing the people on how to live. He says in Leviticus 19, verse 2, that you shall be holy, for I, Yahweh your God, am holy. And so Yahweh has called us to live a life of holiness. In other words, we're called to live a life that pleases Him, that displays our love for God, our jealousy for His love and affection, just as He is jealous for our love. The scriptures are they're all focused on this theme. Be holy as I am holy. We're called to carry the name of God in our very soul, in our mind, in our hands, our feet, in our words, in our relationships, our schoolwork, our jobs. So if you're on the field competing, carry the name. If you're doing your homework, carry the name of God in your efforts and work ethic. If you're home and serving each other, carry the name. God has given us the opportunity to live daily in a dynamic, engaged, and intentional relationship with Him. The kind of relationship where He actually cares about you, cares about your circumstances, your heart. And He invites us to carry His name, to live for His glory, and to share His goodness with the world around us. That calling is infinitely better than the promises that the other ideas in the world make. It's better than the promises of having a million social media followers. It's better than the promises that wealth offers. It's better than the promises that sexuality offers. Because you see, friends disappear. You've seen that. Wealth can be gone in an instant. Ask any adult who lived through the housing market collapse of 2008, or grandparents or great grandparents who lived through the Great Depression. Sexuality is fleeting. The promises of life, anything other than Yahweh, are shallow and short lived. And God has offered us so much in a personal relationship, and He invites us into a life of purpose. That purpose is to carry His name and to live for Him. And so let's be a community that does that.